Welcome back to another GitBook webinar. Super excited to have you here. Feel free, as we welcome a few more people into the webinar, to let us know in the chat where you're calling in from, and also what you're excited to see. We have some pretty cool things to show you guys. I'm pretty excited about this session specifically. This is going to be a new kind of topic that we haven't touched upon so much in the past. We've gone through GitSync in the past. We've set it up a few times and seen how it works at a basic level. But we're excited to have a guest speaker here, kind of showing everyone how they use it internally for their own setup. And we're gonna, basically get a pretty cool sneak preview into some of the cool things you can do from there. Let's dive right in. So if you haven't been to any of our webinars in the past before, my name's Addison. I lead our DevRel team at GitBook, do a lot of things like the webinars here, but I'm joined by Mike. Why don't you give everyone a quick introduction, Mike?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Mike, and I'm a senior technical writer here at Moderne. That being said, even though my title is technical writer, since it's a small startup, I tend to do more than just writing the docs. I also QA some stuff, fix various bugs I find, and write code to generate docs, which I'll show you all later.
Cool. How long has Moderne been using GitBook, actually?
Basically, since we started having public documentation, so probably like 4-5 years ago, something like that. Pretty quickly. Yeah.
Super cool. Yeah, I've seen some of the setup, like you mentioned, we'll be going through later, and it's really impressive. I think the way that you and the team are using it is really cool, which is why I'm excited to have you here and have you show everyone what you guys have been working on. Let's go through a quick agenda. We've kind of just been doing the welcome just at the beginning, but we'll pass it over to Mike after this, give a quick overview about what Moderne is. They'll go through a little bit about their internal setup and their docs and just an overview about how they're using GitBook. I'll take it back. We'll go through GitSync again for those who haven't seen it before. I'll give a quick overview and demo about how you can use GitSync and set it up if you haven't used it in the past. We'll give a quick introduction to what CI/CD workflows are and kind of some of the things you can do. And then Mike's going to give us an in-depth kind of overview of how they have it set up and actually give us a sneak peek into how that workflow actually works if we were to update something. We also, as normally, have a QA at the end. So feel free, if you have any questions and want to get some answers at the end, paste them in the chat and we will, we'll go through it. But why don't you, I'll pass it over to you, Mike. Why don't you give us a quick overview about what Moderne is and kind of let everyone know what you're doing, especially if you haven't heard about your company or your tool before.
Sounds good. Yeah, so to give you some context into Moderne, our goal is to improve developers' lives by assisting with tedious and difficult work that developers often don't want to do, such as addressing technical debt or fixing security vulnerabilities. To achieve that, we have two complementary offerings, Open Rewrite and Moderne. Open Rewrite is an open source refactoring system for code. It lets you refactor applications on a local scale. There are thousands of recipes that you can use to do things like upgrade libraries or frameworks, phase out vulnerable dependencies, or resolve static analysis findings. Moderne, on the other hand, is a place where teams and developers can collaborate to drive migrations across thousands of repositories, mass commit code fixes, and perform large-scale impact analysis. The Moderne tool suite comes with a web platform, a CLI app, and an IntelliJ plugin to take these open rewrite recipes that are all open source and then apply them at mass scale. If you're interested, we do run a free public version of Moderne for any open source projects. So if you have a GitHub account and you want to check it out, feel free. That's some info about Moderne. Should I take us through the docs?
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool to kind of see kind of how you have it set up, because that'll give a good overview, I think, to preface again setting up some of the workflows that we'll show later.
Sure. Cool. So I think you can all see the screen. So we use GitBook to run 3 documentation sites. We run the Open Rewrite docs, the Moderne docs, and then our internal knowledge base all in GitBook. I'll start off by just showing you the Open Rewrite docs. Open Rewrite has two main audiences: people who want to run recipes to update their code, and people who want to create those recipes. If you take a look at our docs, we start off with a section for people who are looking to run recipes and who don't particularly care about how things work behind the scenes, as those are our most common users. And we have a bunch of docs here, as you can see, dedicated to that. We then have a section for people who are interested in creating their own recipes and potentially contributing those back to the community. And then we have a pretty significant recipe catalog. All of these docs in this recipe catalog are auto-generated, and it's quite deeply nested. So to just kind of give you an idea, if we click on like Java, and then security, and then secrets, then find AWS secrets. So you can see there's quite a deep nesting here. And this page gives you everything you need to know about the recipe, including like what it does, how to run it. So you can see this recipe locates AWS secrets stored in plain text in your code. And then it has all of the information here that you would need to do anything with it. To wrap up these docs, we have a section of changelog, reference, concepts, and explanation. Those are mainly for more advanced questions as people are like learning things and they want to learn more about it, so it's lower down. Over on the Moderne side of things, we break up the docs here into user and administrator docs. At a company, only a few people need to know how to set things up, which is the administrator section, but many people, once they've set up our product, will need to learn how to use our product. And so in the user documentation section, we have it split up based on the tools that we offer. So we have, a platform, we have a CLI app, a plugin for JetBrains IDEs, an air gap solution. We also have workshops for people in our own webinars, similar to these that we embed. And at the bottom, we have change logs and release notes, and these are also all automated. Yeah, so those are our docs.
Super cool. I think another kind of interesting thing, how tightly coupled are the Moderne and the Open Rewrite docs? Is there like a lot of overlap between kind of the information that's shared between the two platforms, or are they kind of living kind of separately from each other?
We reference them from the docs, like how to phrase it. So like, for instance, like we talk about Moderne stuff. So you can like click on here to like go to Moderne, and then like in the Moderne docs, we also will talk about like, hey, if you need more information about this, go to the Open Rewrite docs or whatnot, based on where things kind of lie. Because like Open Rewrite is sort of the backing of everything, and like it's where a lot of the logic lies. So if people need to know more about that, we direct them there. And then if it's like interested in like interacting with the product, it's like, oh, go over to these docs.
Yeah, super cool. And I'm guessing then there has a lot to do with like the GitHub actions and the CI/CD workflows between all of that. But it kind of starts from the actual product, and then it filters into the docs on both sides. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's dive into it. Unless you wanted to show anything else about the product, otherwise I think we can hop into kind of giving everyone a quick overview of GitSync again for those who haven't seen it before. Give me 1 sec. I want to share my screen. And we'll share this one. All right. So essentially, if you're unfamiliar with GitSync or what GitBook allows you to do with our integration with GitHub and GitLab, you're able to sync a fully working doc site that you create on GitBook with a repository that you have hosted on GitHub or GitLab. We're going to just focus on the GitHub side of things because I know that's what Mike and Moderne are using, so it will make a little bit more sense in the overview on how the CI/CD workflows are kind of working afterwards. But essentially, what we are going to start by doing is create a new doc site that we can publish. You might have seen some of this stuff. This is from the last webinar we did. But what I'm going to do is start by saying something like my new site. We don't have any content right now. We're going to start from a blank canvas. We are going to do the GitHub import, which it says right here. But we'll just go to the new step. And then what we'll also do is publish this later and create the new site. So we have all the details here. I'm also going to give a quick overview of the new site creation because we've just launched this kind of recently. This new site that we have called My New Site, this is our dashboard for creating the site itself. So we can do things like give it a name. We can enable things like visitor authentication. We can change the audience, and we can also, most importantly, publish this to the web. So let's just keep the name as is. And we'll publish this to the web. By default, it's going to be visible to everyone. We can also do things like customize it, add custom domains, and a lot more. But just for the purposes that we have right here, we have it going. And I'll also just post this in the chat. If you are interested, you can follow along and just see how this kind of turns out throughout the rest of the webinar. You'll also see, though, that as I created this new doc site called My New Site, it also created a new space for me down here called My New Site. It's linked underneath the content section by default here. Also, clicking this little subheader underneath the new doc site will bring you to that content. If you want to be a little bit more explicit, you can name it whatever you'd like. Sometimes you might have more than one kind of content link to a site, so being a little bit more descriptive might be good in this case. So we'll just say something like content. Now, what I want to do is I don't necessarily want to I don't want to import, or excuse me, I don't want to write any of the content inside of GitBook, because what I actually have is a full repository of just markdown files that I want to use inside of here. If we take a look through some of these folders, these are just some folders that nest some markdown files. We do have a GitBook folder with a couple different assets, but you'll see, for instance, in the README, this is just the main welcome page, that the first page that you'll see when you create a new website in GitBook. But in some of the head matter up here, you'll also see that we have like the cover, which is referencing this GitBook folder, and the assets, the position, which is just something if you want to adjust the position, but that's good for now at this. And again, just some plain markdown that we have here. I don't have this synced up to a GitHub repository, but I do have one ready to go. So what I'm going to do is start by initializing a Git repository. I'm going to also add the remote origin, just like this. I'm going to add everything, and just to keep it simple, I'm going to just do initial commit. And I'm just going to push all of this up to the repository that we have. And after just a few seconds, we should now see it inside of here. So now I have all of the markdown files that I have inside of GitHub. And now that we have it on GitHub, and also the steps that I've just shown right now, if you already have a repository filled with content, you don't have to do any of this. You can already import this because now that we have this repository with a couple markdown files inside of it, I can sync it with GitBook. What we're going to do is head first. Let me actually point this out. From whatever space that you want to sync your content from, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a little configure button, and this is going to bring you to the GitSync category. We're obviously going to use the GitHub sync for this one, and we're going to enable it for the new content. Now, we do have to enable it for a few more things here. So we have the My New Site content, which is right here. Let's configure it. And we'll then go to basically authenticate your user account so we can have everything hooked up and good to go. So just going to authorize this first. This will reload it. I have this on my personal account, so I'll select this. The repository I have is webinar headquarters, so let's look for that. And it's right here. And we do want to select the main branch. You might be asked to create a new one if you are going through this with a new repository, or if you want to direct it to a specific one. I will mention that this can be useful if you do want to push things to like a staging branch. If you are working on like a larger product and you only want your docs to deploy on like a staging version or a specific version, you can select whatever branch you want, because this is going to determine when your docs publish. So anytime commits are merged into the main branch of this GitHub repository, it's going to deploy a new website. And we can take a look at some of this a little bit later, or see how that works when Mike goes through some of his demo as well. If you also have it inside of a monorepo, if you are working with your docs inside of like a larger repository, you can point it. This might say something like /docs or something like that, but in our case, it's just the full repository. And if you want to be a little bit more explicit with your messages as you push your changes to GitHub, you can use things like a custom template or get pull request previews on specific forks. But we're going to skip all this. This is also probably a little bit more specific and more useful if you're working on like a larger project or your docs are living within a repository of a larger project. This is also something pretty important if you haven't set up GitSync before. But because you need to sync your content from one place to another, you need to make sure that you choose the right option here. And because we have our content in GitHub already, we're going to choose the first one. After you click the sync button, it's going to go through and sync them. And that's the also cool part, is it's not just a one-time import. It actually will sync everything together. So if we make changes on the GitBook side of things, it'll end up in GitHub, and vice versa. If we make a change on GitHub, it'll end up there as well. So now we have a nice looking, beautiful looking docs right here. And if we want to make any changes here, what we can do is just on the GitHub side of things, we can open up a new change request to make some edits. And we'll just do something like, we'll add some small stuff. Continue reading to learn more about our product. And we'll merge those in. You can also take a preview at them, but we'll just merge them in right away. Now, after things are merged inside of GitBook, you'll see every once in a while, and this should trigger in just a moment, that this will start to resync, and we'll see that the new changes that we made will appear inside of here. So this is just the first commit that I had at first, but now that it's synced, we should see the GitHub GitBook bot add a new commit here, and you'll also see some of these new changes already inside of our README, which is super exciting. The other thing as well is if we go here, we should see the changes right off the bat. We see the exclamation point, and we see the updates here. Now, this is a really easy way to get up and running. Again, if you have your docs already situated somewhere, or if you are using a different documentation tool and want to import them, most of the time you can get them out in some sort of markdown format. And if you already have them hosted on a repository, you should just be able to import them directly and see how things are working here. Now, the real impressive point, and what I want to kind of give a preface is if you have this set up, this allows you to unlock a number of different use cases and a lot of flexibility with the setup that you have. Again, that we're going to explore with Mike. But some of the things that you're able to do, for instance, is now that our files are all listed inside of Markdown files, we have them nested in a specific structure. We also have this file called summary MD, which outlines how things should be structured in the sidebar and how they should be structured in GitBook. But also we can tap into things like GitHub Actions, which allow you to run workflows every time different actions are created. So either a change request is merged in GitBook or a pull request is merged inside of GitHub. You're able to run custom or whatever kind of workflows that you want to modify the things coming in and pushing them back into the main repository, which in turn, like I mentioned, will get deployed to the live section. And inside of here, after whatever review processes you want to have set up, or after whatever transformations you want to have done. So you can already start to think of things like translations. You can have things like linters and autocorrect if you want to have things check against like a style guide, or if you've misspelled things. There's a ton of different possibilities. But now I'm excited to pass it over to Mike, because I think he's going to show us some really cool things that they do with this exact workflow inside of their own docs. Before we hop in there, are there any questions about GitSync and setting it up? Some of you might have seen this before, but happy to answer some quick questions here if there are any. All right, cool. I think let's pass it over to you, Mike, and you can give us a quick overview about how you and the team are using GitSync.
Sure. So I guess to give some context into like documentation or whatnot, I feel like in my experience with documentation, there are a lot of mindless updates that you need to make. So for instance, like maybe you need to check and make sure a particular version number is correct, or maybe you have to copy over an updated description from one place to the next. All those things are things that you may be able to use GitHub Actions to help you automate some of these more mindless tasks. You can think of GitHub Actions as a series of steps that are taken when something happens. So for instance, when a new version is released, you may want to copy that version number, paste it into a file, and add it to your documentation repository. GitHub Actions can do quite a bit more than that, though. For instance, our developers, we have a CLI app, and our developers are constantly adding new commands, parameters, and descriptions to that app. And while I could start every day off by like opening up that repository and seeing if they've added anything new and then copy and pasting that stuff to a reference doc, that would be really tedious and not a great use of my day to be doing that all the time. So instead, I use a GitHub action that detects when a release happens, runs some code to generate a file that contains all of those commands and descriptions, and then copies it over to my GitBook repository as a markdown file. And then GitBook using GitBook Sync will automatically release it as the file changed and our doc site is updated, and I don't have to do anything. So I can just work on other stuff, which is great. Rather than diving into that advanced use case, though, I figured it would be helpful if I created like a simple GitHub action for you all to see and start from. So let me paste that into chat. It's like repository and has all sorts of stuff. And let me share my screen about this. Cool. So yeah, this is just a simple repository I've made for you all. The GitHub action lives in the GitHub workflows directory. And I'll just sort of talk you through what a GitHub action looks like. Let me make this a little bit bigger in case people can't see it. So every action starts off with a name. And this name needs to be a human readable name, because if you go over to the Actions tab, you could see that this name appears right here. So you want people to be able to come here and be like, oh, okay, this is what's going to happen when this action runs. After that, we define how we want to trigger this action. You can have it trigger on many different things. For instance, in this example, I say that I want to trigger whenever a tag is pushed to the repository that starts with the letter V. And I also want to add a workflow dispatch line that says that you can run it manually. For context, the V star thing is like, we do version numbers by V, like 1.0.0, V 1.0.1 or whatnot. So this basically says, if we make a release that matches that version, then this workflow will be run. Below that is a section where we define sort of what's going to happen in the action. An action is made up of one or more jobs. These run in parallel by default, but you can adjust that if you need it. In our simple example, we just have one job, so we don't really need to worry about that. Like the top level action, each job needs to have a name. So this job's name is update test doc and rewrite docs. Rewrite docs is the name of the GitBook docs site. And like the above name, this will also appear in that Actions tab I showed earlier, so that it's very readable and understandable to people what's happening. Each job also needs a runs on line defined for it, which lets GitHub know what type of environment your action should run on. Feel free to just copy this line directly, unless you have a specific environment or OS that you need to run on. It's probably fine to just use this one. And below that is a list of steps, which is where the core logic of our action is defined. The first step is a checkout action. I know this is kind of a confusing terminology because it's like an action and then an action. But basically what this one does is it allows us to check out this repository. inside of the action environment. So in my case, if we look at the top level thing, so I have this test doc here. This is a doc that I want to copy over and update whenever a release happens. And so in order to have access to this test doc, I needed to have a checkout action that could say like, hey, let me access this. Below there, we have the SSH agent step, which is a security step that ensures that random people can't just commit changes to my repository. I added a detailed explanation in the README of this repository of how to create these things. So here's like all the information you need about how to create an SSH key, and also information about how to create the action for yourselves. We're not going to walk through all of that, but it's there if you're interested in it. And then the last step, this is where kind of the core logic lives. So the first thing here, I tried to comment it for people, is this just makes a bot, just a simple like GitHub bot that you can use to create commits with. I then clone my GitBook repository into this environment where this action is running so that I have access to my docs and I can make changes to it. I'm then grabbing a tag here, which is just the release version. So in this example, it's like I'm going to just say like, hey, what version are we on? Okay, let's update the docs to have that version number in it. After that, we can see this is where I actually edit the doc. So in my test doc, I add like some new lines. I add a tag, some new lines. You could kind of do whatever you want here. This is just, a simple example. I then copy that test doc over to the rewrite docs that I've cloned from above, and then I do a commit for it. So to kind of show you how this works, if we take a look over in the rewrite docs section, I have a test doc over here. So you can see right now it has 1.0.3 as a version, and that matches the current, let me make this a little smaller, the current release over here. So if we click on releases and we pretend like, hey, I'm going to make a new release. So let's name it v.1.0.4. And we'll say, this is a test release for the GitBook Webinar. And now all I have to do is publish this release. And if we take a look in the Actions tab here, you can see it started this update test doc action. And if we click on it, we can see that it's like, okay, it's running the job. This might take a minute, but you can see like each of those things, like the checkout code, the SSH, the push to rewrite docs, that all matches what I just showed you there. And hopefully everything just runs correctly. Okay, cool. So it looks like that's all pushed. And so now if we take a look in the rewrite docs, you can see that this is automatically updated. It's now 1.0.4. And if we take a look at our GitHub Actions, we can see that right now it's deploying to GitBook. Other actions, as was mentioned earlier, is like we have a check spelling action that'll detect for spelling issues. We have a broken reference action that'll detect if I mess something up in our GitBook links or whatnot. And so hopefully that'll just deploy soon. And then we can see it in the website itself. Yep. All right. So now it says it's live on GitBook. And so if I refresh our GitBook webinar test doc, well, sometimes it takes a little bit to refresh this on the GitBook side of things, but this should say 1.0.4. Things tend to be cached, so hopefully in a few minutes that would get updated.
It should update in just a few minutes, hopefully a little bit faster than that, but.
Yep. But yeah, so that's everything you need to know about GitHub Actions and getting started with it.
This is super, super cool. And yeah, the reason, well, thank you first off for showing this. I think this is going to be super helpful for anyone who's interested in setting something up like this. One of the questions I had for you that might be also useful for others on the call as well is, when you're looking through doing some of these other checks, for instance, like things like the spelling check or the broken references, are there other tools that you use at Moderne for this, or are these things that you're mostly kind of coming up with as yourself as different needs kind of arise?
Yeah, all of these, for the most part, are things that we've come up with ourselves. I will say the spelling check was actually done by a community member who noticed a bunch of spelling errors in our doc site and was like, hey, I make this spell check tool that you can add by just adding this GitHub action to your doc site. And we're like, sure, that sounds great. And so they added that, and now we just run it. And it finds all the spelling errors as we make them.
Yeah, that's super cool. Feel free to link that if you'd like, also in the chat too. I feel like something like that could definitely be useful for others as well. And the other thing that I wanted to ask is, well, I guess this should probably give a pretty good overview. But setting something up like this should be pretty, I would say, easy for someone who's looking to get started. You had mentioned it before, but I think it's worth re-mentioning, is if you are interested in setting this up, Mike did a great job at kind of outlining, yeah, kind of the steps inside of the README on getting this example up and running. So if it's something that you want to get running for yourself, you should be able to copy and paste most of it and tweak just a few things inside of the README. But also, you're always welcome to reach out to myself or inside of our community if you have any questions, or we're definitely able to answer some questions. If there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap up the webinar just a bit early. We do have plans to have a few more webinars in the future, whether it's on GitBook with some future partners. But we do want to give just another big thank you to you all and Mike. Yeah, we really enjoyed the webinar and hope you had a good time as well.
Thank you so much for hosting.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time. Make sure you head to our community on GitHub or visit us at gitbook.com/events and keep an eye out for the next one. All right. Bye, everyone.